Look up at the night sky. Up there, in the silent, cold expanse of the asteroid belt, are objects containing more wealth than has ever existed on Earth. We're talking about trillions of dollars in platinum, gold, and crucial industrial metals. This isn't science fiction anymore, it's the next industrial revolution. Companies are already forming, technologies are being developed, and the countdown to the first commercial asteroid mining operation has begun. But an enormous question hangs over this cosmic gold rush: who owns it? The moment a space-made drill hits a nickel-iron asteroid and extracts a gram of platinum, the entire legal framework of space, built during the Cold War, crashes headfirst into the brutal reality of capitalism. The legal gray area around asteroid mining is not just an academic debate, it's a high-stakes, geopolitical fight for the resources that will power our future. In this video, we'll dive deep into the laws of space, the nations that are already staking their claims, and the global battle for the wealth of the cosmos. To understand the conflict, we have to start at the beginning, the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, OST. Born in the shadow of the space race, this treaty is the bedrock of all international space law, signed by over 110 countries, including all the major spacefaring powers. It was created with two main goals: to ensure space is used for peaceful purposes and to prevent a chaotic land rush. The most critical principle, the one that drives the entire current debate, is enshrined in Article 2. Outer space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, is not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty, by means of use or occupation, or by any other means. This is where the ambiguity begins. The OST explicitly forbids countries from claiming a planet or an asteroid. No flags on the Moon to claim it for a nation. But here's the million-dollar, or rather, trillion-dollar, loophole: it doesn't explicitly mention the extraction and ownership of resources by private, commercial entities. Is extracting resources the same as national appropriation? Is taking a bucket of water ice from a lunar crater the same as claiming the crater itself? For decades, this was an academic thought experiment. Now, it's a legal emergency. The treaty allows for the exploration and use of space, and proponents of mining argue that resource extraction is a form of use, perfectly permissible under the OST. Opponents, including some nations like Russia and China, argue it fundamentally violates the spirit of non-appropriation. In 1979, the United Nations tried to close the looming resource loophole by drafting the Moon Agreement. This treaty was explicit. It stated that the natural resources of celestial bodies are the common heritage of mankind, and that an international regime should be established to govern their exploitation and ensure their equitable sharing. It would have solved the problem, but almost no one signed it. The US, Russia, China, and almost every other major space power rejected it. It's now widely considered a failed treaty, a non-starter. The failure of the Moon Agreement left the Outer Space Treaty as the only binding law, and its ambiguity became a massive, glaring opportunity for the first countries bold enough to seize it. Seeing the opportunity and the lack of international consensus, several forward-thinking nations decided to legislate their own answer to the question: who owns space resources? In 2015, the United States fired the opening shot. Congress passed the Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act. This landmark legislation granted US citizens, meaning US companies, the right to own any space resources they obtain from an asteroid or celestial body. Crucially, the law explicitly states it does not grant ownership of the celestial body itself, trying to navigate around the OST's non-appropriation clause. They essentially said, the land is nobody's, but the gold you dig up is yours. Other small, powerful nations quickly followed suit. Luxembourg, a small country with massive financial ambition, enacted its own space resource law in 2017. The United Arab Emirates and Japan also adopted similar domestic legislation. These nations have essentially created a de facto legal framework for their domestic companies, a kind of Wild West of the cosmos, where the local sheriff has written the rules but no global treaty recognizes his jurisdiction. This patchwork of national laws has created a global uproar. Russia and many developing nations argue these unilateral laws are a direct violation of the OST's spirit, setting a dangerous precedent that will lead to a new form of space colonialism where only the wealthiest countries benefit. They argue the US is essentially sanctioning a private form of national appropriation. Launched in 2020, the Accords are a set of non-binding, bilateral agreements that outline best practices for space exploration. They are agreements signed individually between the US and its partners, now including dozens of countries like the UK, Japan, Canada, Australia, and Brazil. The Accords specifically endorse the position that extraction and utilization of space resources is permissible, stating it should be done in a safe and sustainable manner. They also propose the establishment of safety zones around mining operations to prevent harmful interference, essentially granting a form of temporary, exclusive access to a resource patch, another concept that strongly challenges the spirit of the old treaties. The Artemis Accords are a game changer. They aren't a traditional UN treaty, so they bypass the need for consensus from countries that oppose resource privatization. Instead, they form a powerful bloc of nations and commercial partners who have agreed on a set of operating principles. They represent the leading edge of a new, market-driven international space law. Critics, however, view the Accords as a US-led attempt to solidify its own interpretation of space law, creating two distinct legal systems: the old, Universal Outer Space Treaty Club, and the new, commercially focused Artemis Accords Club. This division poses a huge risk for future conflict and non-cooperation. Even with these national laws and the Artemis Accords, the most critical questions remain unanswered. 1. How do you prevent harmful interference? If two companies from two different countries, say, a US company and a Chinese company, try to mine the same asteroid, whose law applies? The Outer Space Treaty mandates due regard for the interests of others, but it offers no real dispute resolution mechanism. The creation of a safety zone by one country may be viewed as an act of appropriation by another. 2. What about the environment? The OST requires avoiding the harmful contamination of celestial bodies. How do we measure the environmental impact of large-scale extraction? Who monitors it? Will we see space debris and mining waste turn a celestial body into a planetary landfill? The concept of sustainability in space resource utilization is currently an ethical goal, not a legally binding, enforced standard. What about the benefit of all mankind? Article 1 of the OST states that the exploration and use of space shall be for the benefit and in the interests of all countries and shall be the province of all mankind. If all the wealth flows to a handful of private companies and a few wealthy nations, is the spirit of this principle truly being honored? The Hague International Space Resources Governance Working Group, a body of legal experts, has proposed a set of non-binding building blocks for a future governance framework. These propose concepts like priority rights for companies that register a claim and the establishment of safety zones, essentially trying to professionalize the first-come, first-served model while still adhering to the OST's non-appropriation principle. But they are just that, building blocks, not law. We are at a critical juncture. The economic incentive for asteroid mining is vast, and the technology is rapidly approaching reality. But the international legal system is fractured, relying on a 58-year-old treaty that never foresaw space capitalism. The future of space resources will be defined not by the ingenuity of our engineers, but by the willingness of nations to sit down and agree on a universal, equitable set of rules before the cosmic gold rush truly begins. The asteroid belt awaits, and the question of who owns its bounty is still up for grabs.